The large clock on the mall's wall showed 8:45 p.m. as Marcus Johnson pushed his cleaning cart down the empty corridor. Most of the stores had already pulled down their shutters, leaving only the dim evening lights to guide his way. At 45 years old, Marcus had worked as a janitor at Riverside Mall for the past 7 years, and the night shift had become his quiet companion. Marcus liked the peaceful hours when the noisy crowds were gone. The only sounds were the soft hum of his vacuum cleaner and the quiet music playing from the mall's speakers. He moved from store to store, doing his job with care and pride. Even though some people looked down on janitors, Marcus believed that every job deserved respect if done well. As he cleaned the sparkling floor near the food court, his mind wandered to memories from long ago. 25 years had passed since that difficult day when he signed the adoption papers for his baby daughter. He had been young then, just 20 years old, struggling to make ends meet after his girlfriend left them both. The choice to give his daughter a better life with another family had been the hardest decision he had ever made. Marcus shook his head, trying to focus on his work. These thoughts always came to him during the quiet night hours. He reached into his pocket and touched the small, worn photo he always carried, a picture of his baby girl, just 3 months old, sleeping peacefully in her hospital crib. He wondered what she looked like now, if she was happy, if she had children of her own. The sound of his phone's alarm brought him back to reality. It was time to clean the west wing of the mall. As he turned his cart around, something caught his eye, a small movement near the closed toy store. At first, he thought it might be one of the mall's security guards doing their rounds. But when he looked closer, his heart skipped a beat. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, stood alone in front of the toy store's window. She wore a pink dress with white shoes, and her hair was tied in 2 neat braids. Even from a distance, Marcus could see that she was crying, her small shoulders shaking as she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Marcus looked around quickly, expecting to see worried parents searching for their child. But the corridor was empty except for them. His years of experience working at the mall had taught him to be careful in such situations. Some parents didn't like strangers approaching their children, even if they were trying to help. Mall security should be informed first, he thought, reaching for his radio. But before he could make the call, the little girl noticed him and took a few steps in his direction. "Excuse me, sir." Her voice was soft and scared. "I can't find my mommy and daddy." Marcus's heart melted at the sight of her tearful face. Something about her reminded him so much of his own daughter, a thought that surprised him since he had never seen his little girl grow up. He set down his radio and knelt to the girl's level, keeping a respectful distance. "It's okay, sweetheart. We'll find them," he said in a gentle voice. "My name is Marcus, and I work here at the mall. Would you like to tell me your name?" The girl nodded, doing something that made Marcus's breath catch. She scrunched up her nose while thinking, just like he did. "I'm Sarah," she said. "Sarah Matthews. I was looking at the teddy bears, and when I turned around, my parents were gone." "Don't worry, Sarah," Marcus said, his voice steady and reassuring. "I'm going to help you find them. Would you like a juice box while we wait? I have some in my break room, and we can ask the security guards to help us look for your parents." Sarah nodded again, this time with a small smile breaking through her tears. As Marcus stood up and reached for his radio to call security, he had no idea that this simple act of kindness would change his life forever. This lost little girl would lead him to find something he had lost long ago: his family. Marcus guided Sarah to the small break room near the service corridor. The room wasn't fancy, but it was clean and warm, with a small table, a few chairs, and a mini fridge where he kept his lunch and some extra drinks. Sarah followed him closely, her small hand holding onto the sleeve of his uniform. "Here you go," Marcus said, pulling out a chair for Sarah. He opened the fridge and took out 2 juice boxes, apple and orange. "Which flavor would you like?" Sarah pointed to the apple juice, and Marcus couldn't help but smile. His daughter had loved apple juice too. He watched as Sarah took small sips, her tears slowly drying on her cheeks. While she drank her juice, Marcus radioed mall security to let them know about the situation. "So, Sarah," Marcus said gently, sitting down across from her, "can you tell me more about your mom and dad? What do they look like? What were they wearing today?" Sarah set down her juice box, and that familiar nose scrunch appeared again as she thought. "Mommy is wearing a blue dress today. She has pretty brown hair like mine. Daddy is tall and has glasses. He's wearing a white shirt." She paused, then added proudly, "They're not my first mommy and daddy, though. I'm adopted, just like my mom." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat at her words. "Your mom is adopted too?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual even as his mind raced with possibilities. "Uh-huh," Sarah nodded, seeming more relaxed now. "She helps sick kids at the hospital. That's where she works. She says being adopted is special because it means your parents picked you specially to be their kid." Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he remembered the young nurse who had adopted his daughter all those years ago. She had promised to give his baby girl the best life possible, and had mentioned wanting to work in pediatrics. Could it be? No, he told himself. It had to be a coincidence. While they waited for security to search the mall, Sarah told Marcus about her birthday coming up next week. That's why they were at the mall, to look for presents. She was going to turn 7 and wanted a special teddy bear she had seen in the toy store window. "The brown one with the red bow?" Marcus asked, remembering seeing it during his cleaning rounds. Sarah's eyes lit up. "Yes, that's the one. It looks just like my old teddy that got lost when we moved houses." She suddenly looked sad again. "I hope Mommy and Daddy come back soon. They must be really worried." "Don't worry," Marcus assured her, though his own mind was filled with questions. "Security is looking for them right now. They'll find them soon." Just then, Marcus's radio crackled to life. "Mr. Johnson," the security guard's voice came through. "We've located the parents. They're at the information desk on the first floor. Can you bring the child there?" Sarah jumped up excitedly, but then surprised Marcus by reaching for his hand. "Will you come with me?" she asked, looking up at him with trust in her eyes. "Of course," Marcus replied softly, touched by her request. As they walked hand in hand toward the escalator, Sarah chatted about her school, her friends, and her pet goldfish named Bubble. Marcus listened, finding himself more and more drawn to this little girl who somehow seemed so familiar. They were almost at the information desk when Sarah suddenly squeezed his hand tighter. "There they are," she exclaimed, pointing ahead. Marcus looked up, and the sight of the woman in the blue dress made him freeze mid-step. Even after 25 years, he would recognize that face anywhere. It was Rebecca Matthews, the same woman who had adopted his daughter all those years ago. And if Sarah was her granddaughter, that meant. Marcus felt the world spin around him as the pieces began falling into place. Marcus stood rooted to the spot, his mind racing as he watched Rebecca Matthews talking to the security guard at the information desk. She hadn't noticed them yet, and he used these precious seconds to gather his thoughts. Sarah was still holding his hand, swinging it back and forth, completely unaware of the storm of emotions building inside him. "Excuse me," a deep voice called out. Marcus turned to see Tom, the head of mall security, walking quickly toward them. "Mr. Johnson, before you take her to her parents, we need to follow proper protocol. Would you mind bringing Sarah to the security office first? Her parents can meet us there." Marcus nodded, grateful for the delay. He wasn't ready to face Rebecca just yet. He looked down at Sarah, who was beginning to frown. "Don't worry," he said softly. "It's just to make sure everything is done properly. Your parents will be there in a minute." As they walked to the security office, Marcus's mind went back to that day at the adoption agency. Rebecca had been so kind, showing him pictures of her home, telling him about her plans to become a pediatric nurse, and promising to give his daughter the life he couldn't provide. He had been living in a tiny apartment then, working 3 jobs and barely making ends meet. The security office was brightly lit and had comfortable chairs. Tom offered Sarah a lollipop from his desk drawer, which she accepted with a shy "thank you." While they waited, Marcus helped Sarah sit on one of the chairs, noticing how her feet didn't quite reach the floor. "Mr. Johnson," Tom said quietly, pulling him aside. "The parents seem pretty shaken up. They've been searching for almost an hour. Where exactly did you find her?" "Near the toy store on the 2nd floor," Marcus replied, keeping his voice low. "She was looking at a teddy bear in the window display. I called security right away, but," he paused, wondering if he should mention his suspicions about knowing Sarah's grandmother. Before he could continue, there was a knock on the door. Tom opened it to reveal Rebecca and her husband, both looking worried and relieved at the same time. Sarah jumped up from her chair. "Grandma, Grandpa," she called out, running to them. Rebecca hugged Sarah tightly, tears in her eyes. "Oh, sweetheart, we were so worried. Your mom and dad are on their way. They've been searching the other side of the mall. Marcus tried to step back, to blend into the background as he always did during his night shift work. But something about his movement caught Rebecca's attention. She looked up, and their eyes met. For a moment, there was no recognition in her face, just gratitude toward the janitor who had found her granddaughter. "Thank you so much for finding her," she said warmly. "We can't tell you how worried we've been." Then she looked at him more closely, and Marcus saw the exact moment when recognition dawned in her eyes. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Marcus? Marcus Johnson?" The room fell silent except for Sarah's voice as she told her grandfather about the juice box Marcus had given her. Tom looked between them, sensing something significant was happening, but not understanding what. Marcus cleared his throat, finding his voice. "Hello, Rebecca," he said quietly. "It's been a long time." Rebecca's husband stepped forward, still holding Sarah's hand. "You two know each other?" he asked, looking confused. Before either could answer, the office door burst open again. A younger woman rushed in, her face flushed from running. "Sarah," she cried out. "Oh, thank God you're safe." Marcus felt his heart stop as he looked at the woman. She was the spitting image of his late mother, the same eyes, the same chin, the same way of carrying herself. This was his daughter, Claire. And she had no idea her biological father was standing right in front of her. The security office suddenly felt too small for all the emotions filling it. Claire held Sarah tightly in her arms, checking her daughter for any signs of distress. Sarah's father, Michael, arrived moments later, out of breath from running across the mall. The family reunion would have been a beautiful sight to anyone watching, but Marcus could barely breathe as he looked at his daughter, now a grown woman, for the first time in 25 years. "She's fine, really," Tom, the security guard, assured the worried parents. "Mr. Johnson here found her and took excellent care of her until we could locate you." Claire finally looked up to thank the janitor who had found her daughter. Her eyes met Marcus's, and for a moment, there was no recognition, just gratitude. But Rebecca, still standing nearby, hadn't taken her eyes off Marcus since she'd recognized him. "Claire," Rebecca said softly, her voice trembling. "Claire, sweetheart, there's something you need to know." Marcus wanted to speak, but his throat felt too tight. He watched as Claire stood up, still holding Sarah's hand. She looked confused by her mother's tone. "Mom, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Rebecca took a deep breath. "In a way I have." She gestured toward Marcus. This is Marcus Johnson, your biological father." The room fell completely silent. Even Sarah, who had been chattering about her adventure, stopped talking and looked around at the adults' serious faces. Claire's expression changed from confusion to shock as she stared at Marcus more carefully. Marcus found himself holding his breath as Claire studied his face. He could see her noticing the same things he had already seen, how they had the same eyes, the same way of standing, even the same habit of pressing their lips together when nervous, just like she was doing now. I don't understand," Claire finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Why are you here?" Marcus cleared his throat. "I work here," he said simply, gesturing to his janitor's uniform. "I found Sarah near the toy store. I had no idea." His voice trailed off as he saw tears forming in Claire's eyes. Michael, Claire's husband, stepped forward and put a supportive arm around his wife. "Maybe we should all sit down," he suggested gently. Tom, understanding the private nature of the moment, quietly excused himself from the office. Sarah looked up at her mother, then at Marcus. "Mommy, why are you crying?" Claire wiped her eyes quickly and managed a smile for her daughter. "Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're surprised, sweetie. It's okay." She turned back to Marcus, her voice stronger now. "All these years, I've wondered about you. Mom and Dad told me you gave me up because you wanted me to have a better life." Marcus nodded, fighting back his own tears. "You were everything to me," he said quietly, "but I was young, struggling to make ends meet. When I met Rebecca and John at the adoption agency, I knew they could give you opportunities I couldn't even dream of providing." Rebecca stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Claire's shoulder. "Your father made the most selfless choice a parent can make," she said softly. "He put your needs above his own feelings." Sarah, who had been listening intently, suddenly spoke up. Does this mean Mr. Marcus is my grandpa too? She asked innocently. The simple question from a child broke the tension in the room. Claire let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Yes, Sarah, she said, looking at Marcus with new understanding in her eyes. He is your grandfather. Marcus felt his heart swell with emotion. In one evening, he had not only found his long-lost daughter, but discovered he had a granddaughter too. As he watched Sarah's face light up with a smile that looked so much like Claire's when she was little, he silently thanked whatever twist of fate had brought them all together in this mall on this night. The security office chairs had been arranged in a circle, and the family sat together, trying to process the incredible events of the evening. Sarah had climbed onto Marcus's lap, completely comfortable with her newly discovered grandfather, while Claire sat next to them, still wiping occasional tears from her eyes. I can't believe you've been working here all this time, Claire said softly. I shop at this mall at least once a month. We might have passed each other so many times. Marcus nodded, remembering all the times he had glimpsed people from a distance during his night shifts. I usually work evenings, he explained. Most shoppers are gone by then. It's peaceful that way. He paused, then added, but I've always wondered about you. Every single day. Rebecca reached into her large purse and pulled out her phone. I have something to show you, Marcus, she said, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. I've kept photos of every important moment in Claire's life. I always hoped that someday, somehow, we might find you. She handed the phone to Marcus, who had to blink back tears as he looked at the first photo. It showed Claire at age 5, missing her front teeth, grinning widely at the camera. Sarah leaned forward to look at the picture too. That's you, Mommy? She asked in amazement. You look just like my friend Jenny when she lost her teeth. Everyone laughed, and the tension in the room eased a little more. Rebecca swiped to the next photo. Claire in a ballet costume, then at her high school graduation, then in her college dorm room. Marcus drank in every image, his heart aching for all the moments he had missed but grateful to see them now. I went to law school, Claire told him, watching his face as he looked at the photos. I'm a family lawyer now. I help other families, especially with adoptions. She smiled softly. I guess I wanted to help create happy endings for other people. Marcus felt pride swell in his chest. A lawyer, he said, his voice full of emotion. That's wonderful. I knew you would do amazing things. He looked at Rebecca and John. Thank you for giving her the chances I couldn't. Michael, who had been quietly supportive throughout, spoke up. Claire helps a lot of single parents find the best path forward, he said. Some choose adoption, some find resources to help them keep their children. She understands both sides better than anyone. Sarah, who had been surprisingly patient during all this grown-up talk, suddenly sat up straighter on Marcus's lap. I have 2 grandpas now, she announced proudly. And my new grandpa found me when I was lost, just like how my mommy found her real daddy today. The simple wisdom of her words touched everyone in the room. Claire reached over and squeezed Marcus's hand. She's right, she said. All these years, I never felt lost because Mom and Dad gave me such a wonderful life. But finding you, it feels like finding a piece of myself I didn't even know was missing. Marcus looked around the room at these people who had suddenly become his family. His daughter Claire, successful and strong. His granddaughter Sarah, bright and loving. Rebecca and John, who had kept their promise to give Claire a good life. And Michael, who had helped create this beautiful family. I need to tell you something, he said, his voice thick with emotion. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his worn wallet. From it, he carefully removed the old photograph he always carried, the one of baby Claire in the hospital. I've carried this picture every day for 25 years. I never stopped loving you, never stopped hoping you were happy. Claire took the photo with trembling hands, staring at her baby self. You kept this all this time? She whispered. Every single day, Marcus repeated softly. You were always with me, even when we were apart. The mall's closing announcement echoed through the hallways outside the security office, but nobody inside seemed to notice. Rebecca had moved her chair closer to Marcus and was showing him more photos on her phone, each one a precious piece of Claire's life story that he had missed. This was her first piano recital, Rebecca said, showing a picture of young Claire in a purple dress, sitting proudly at a grand piano. She was so nervous that day, but she played beautifully. Marcus leaned forward, studying every detail. She has her mother's hands, he said softly. Long fingers, perfect for piano. Marie, Claire's birth mother, she used to play too. Claire, who had been quietly listening, looked up with surprise. I never knew that about my birth mother, she said. Did she? Did she play well? Marcus nodded, his eyes distant with memories. She was amazing. Used to play at church every Sunday. That's where we met, actually. He paused, then added gently. She would have been so proud of you, Claire. She passed away before you were born, but she loved you so much already. Sarah, who had moved to sit between her parents, looked confused. So I had 3 grandmas? Regular Grandma Rebecca, Angel Grandma Marie, and… She counted on her fingers, trying to work it out. That's right, sweetie, Michael explained, helping her understand. Just like you have 3 grandpas now, Grandpa John, Grandpa Marcus, and Grandpa Peter on my side. Rebecca swiped to another photo, this one showing Claire in a white graduation gown. This was her high school graduation, she explained. She was valedictorian of her class. Marcus felt his chest swell with pride. What was your speech about? He asked Claire. Claire smiled, remembering. About how our paths in life aren't always straight lines. Sometimes the unexpected turns lead us to where we're meant to be. She looked at Marcus meaningfully. I guess that speech means even more now. The next photo showed Claire in a beautiful white wedding dress, standing between Rebecca and John. Marcus felt a pang in his heart, wishing he could have been there, but he pushed the feeling aside. He was here now, that's what mattered. Michael and I met in law school, Claire explained, reaching for her husband's hand. He works in corporate law, but he always helps me with my adoption cases when I need a second opinion. Sarah tugged on Marcus's sleeve. Do you want to see my pictures too? She asked eagerly. Mommy has lots of pictures of me on her phone. Everyone laughed as Claire pulled out her own phone and started showing Marcus photos of Sarah, her first steps, her first day of school, her ballet recitals. Marcus noticed how Sarah had Claire's smile and, surprisingly, his own mother's curly hair. She loves to draw, Claire said proudly, showing a picture of Sarah with a colorful artwork. The art teacher says she has real talent. Marcus smiled, remembering something. That runs in the family too. My mother, your grandmother, was an artist. She used to paint beautiful landscapes. I think I still have some of her paintings in my apartment. The revelation of these family connections, talents, traits, and stories passing down through generations, filled the room with a sense of wonder. Even though they had been separated for 25 years, the bonds of family had remained, waiting to be discovered. You know, Rebecca said thoughtfully, looking at Marcus, we have so many more photos at home. Albums full of Claire growing up. And videos too, her first steps, her school plays, everything. Would you like to see them sometime? Marcus looked at Claire, uncertain, but she nodded encouragingly. Please come, she said. We have so much to catch up on, 25 years of stories to share. Sarah clapped her hands excitedly. Yes, and I can show you my room, and my drawings, and bubble my goldfish, and… As Sarah continued listing all the things she wanted to show her new grandfather, Marcus felt tears of joy forming in his eyes. The night shift at the mall would never be lonely again, not now that he had found his family. The mall was officially closed now, but Tom, the head of security, told them they could take their time. The family had moved from the small security office to the more comfortable seating area near the indoor fountain. The sound of flowing water provided a peaceful background as Marcus and Claire sat together, making up for lost time. I have so many questions, Claire said, her voice gentle, but I don't even know where to start. She looked at her father. It still felt strange to think of him that way, and saw how his hands trembled slightly as he held his cup of vending machine coffee. Marcus took a deep breath. You can ask me anything, he said. I've waited 25 years to tell you everything you want to know. Sarah had fallen asleep on Michael's lap nearby, tired from all the excitement. Rebecca and John sat close by, holding hands and watching their daughter reconnect with her biological father. They had raised Claire with love, but they had always known this day might come. Did you ever think about looking for me? Claire asked, then quickly added, I know you couldn't. The adoption was closed, and I understand why, but did you ever want to? Marcus's eyes filled with tears. Every single day, he said softly. I used to walk past parks and wonder if any of the little girls playing there were you. I'd see father-daughter dance announcements at the community center and imagine what it would be like to dance with you. He wiped his eyes. But I knew Rebecca and John were giving you the life you deserved. A better life than I could offer back then. Claire reached out and took his hand. They did give me a wonderful life, she agreed. But that doesn't mean I didn't think about you too. Especially after Sarah was born. I'd look at her and wonder about my own birth parents. Sarah stirred in her sleep, mumbling something about teddy bears. Claire smiled fondly at her daughter. You know, when we adopted Sarah, I thought about you again, about how hard it must have been to let me go. Now that I'm a mother, I understand even more what a sacrifice that was. Marcus squeezed her hand. You were only 3 months old, he remembered. Marie, your birth mother, had passed away from complications after your birth. I was 20 years old, working 3 jobs, living in a tiny apartment with broken heating. When I met Rebecca and John at the adoption agency, he looked over at them gratefully. I knew they could give you everything I couldn't. But look at you now, Claire said, gesturing around the mall. You've built a good life. You're respected here. Tom speaks so highly of you. Marcus smiled. I went back to school, got my GED, took some community college classes. It wasn't easy, but I wanted to make something of myself. Just in case. His voice trailed off. Just in case we ever met again. Rebecca walked over and placed a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder. You did more than that, she said kindly. You gave us the greatest gift anyone could give, and you trusted us to raise her well. And now, Claire added, Sarah has another grandfather who already loves her so much. When she wakes up, she's going to have so many more questions for you. Marcus looked at his sleeping granddaughter, then back at his daughter. The resemblance between them was striking, the same gentle spirit, the same kind eyes. I can't believe how much I've missed, he said. But I'm so grateful for this second chance. It's not a second chance, Claire corrected him gently. It's just our chance, our time to be a family starting now. The fountain continued its peaceful song behind them as father and daughter sat together, making plans for Sunday dinners, holiday celebrations, and all the moments they would share from now on. Sometimes the longest journeys lead right back home, to the family you were always meant to find. 3 weeks had passed since that magical night at the mall. Marcus stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie for the 5th time. He had bought a new suit for this special occasion, Sarah's 7th birthday party. It would be his first time visiting Claire's home, and his hands trembled slightly with nervousness. The small apartment he lived in looked different now. On his previously bare walls hung 2 framed photos. One of Claire as a baby that he had carried for 25 years, and a new family picture taken at the mall the day after their reunion. Tom, the security guard, had taken it for them near the fountain. Marcus picked up Sarah's birthday present from his bed, the special teddy bear from the mall's toy store window that had started it all. He had gone back the next day to buy it, and the store manager, after hearing the amazing story, had even added a beautiful red bow for free. The drive to Claire's house took 20 minutes. Marcus recognized the neighborhood. It was one of the nicest in town, with big houses and well-kept gardens. As he parked his old car in front of the address Claire had given him, he saw balloons tied to the mailbox and heard children's laughter coming from the backyard. Grandpa Marcus. Sarah's voice rang out as soon as he stepped out of his car. She came running down the driveway, wearing a pink princess dress and a birthday crown. Behind her, Claire appeared in the doorway, smiling warmly. You're early, Claire said, walking over to hug him. That's good. Sarah's been asking when you'd arrive every 5 minutes for the past hour. Marcus handed Sarah her present, and her eyes grew wide with excitement. The teddy bear, she exclaimed, the same one from the mall. She hugged it tightly, then grabbed Marcus's hand. Come see my party. I want you to meet all my friends. The backyard had been transformed into a magical space with fairy lights, colorful streamers, and tables set up for the children. Rebecca and John were there, helping Michael set up games. Other parents and children moved around, enjoying the party atmosphere. Everyone, Sarah announced loudly to her friends. This is my new grandpa. He found me when I was lost at the mall, and then we found out he's my mommy's daddy. Isn't that cool? The children gathered around, amazed by this real-life fairy tale. One little girl asked, like in the movies, when people find their real families. Even better than the movies, Sarah said proudly, because it's real. Throughout the afternoon, Marcus found himself surrounded by family in a way he had never experienced before. He helped Michael grill hot dogs, watched Sarah blow out her candles, and shared stories with Rebecca and John about Claire's childhood, filling in the gaps of what each of them had known. As the party went on, Claire pulled Marcus aside to a quiet corner of the yard. "I have something to show you," she said, leading him into the house. In the living room, she pointed to a newly hung photo on the wall. It was the picture of baby Claire that Marcus had carried all these years, now beautifully framed. "I had it restored and enlarged," Claire explained. "I want Sarah to always know the whole story of our family, how love can take different forms, and how sometimes the best gifts come in unexpected ways." Marcus felt tears in his eyes as he looked at the photo. "I never thought I'd see this picture hanging in your home," he said softly. "This is your home too now," Claire replied, hugging him. "Every Sunday dinner, every holiday, every birthday, you'll always have a place here." They heard Sarah calling from outside, "Mommy, Grandpa Marcus, you're missing the party games." Marcus laughed, wiping his eyes. "We better get back out there. Can't disappoint the birthday girl." As they walked back to the party, Marcus looked around at this family that was now his, Sarah playing with her friends, Michael manning the grill, Rebecca and John helping with the games, and Claire by his side. The lonely nights at the mall seemed like a distant memory now. Sometimes the hardest choices in life lead to the most beautiful destinations. Marcus had given up his daughter 25 years ago to give her a better life, and now life had given them both an even greater gift, the chance to be a family again, with even more love than before.